Welcome to the video. Today we unpack a recent court ruling that halted a proposed data sharing agreement between the nation's primary tax authority and its immigration enforcement agency. We will explore why the court intervened, what this means for privacy and executive power, and how it affects citizens and compliance. To guide you smoothly, we will move from background to legal principles, impacts, and practical takeaways, with diagrams to visualize the issues. Before we begin, this is not legal advice. This is general information designed to help you understand the context, legal concepts, and civic implications. For any specific case or question, consult a licensed attorney. Now, with that clear, let's transition to the core context of the ruling. A judicial order blocked a data sharing agreement between the tax authority and immigration enforcement. This did not merely pause interagency cooperation. It raised a foundational question. How do we balance government effectiveness with individual confidentiality? With that backdrop, let's outline our agenda so you know what to expect. Here's our roadmap. First, we will explore why taxpayer data is treated as highly confidential. Next, we will examine the legal check known as judicial restraint and compare it with enforcement necessities. After that, we will look at practical impacts on communities and taxpayers. Then we will distill key takeaways for citizens. Test your understanding with short quizzes, and use diagrams to connect the dots throughout. Taxpayer information is among the most sensitive data government holds. Voluntary tax compliance depends on trust that disclosures will be used for tax administration, not unrelated enforcement. If people fear tax data may be repurposed for immigration checks, compliance and participation can decline. Confidentiality statutes, regulations, and norms have long erected legal walls between functions to preserve that trust. The flowchart illustrates the proposed path of data, from tax filing to potential immigration enforcement, and where the court steps in to block sharing and keep data siloed. Now let's transition to why the court felt authorized to intervene. Courts often intervene when an agency appears to exceed its statutory authority. Here, the likely legal hinge was whether the tax authority had a clear legislative mandate to share large volumes of confidential data for general immigration enforcement. Purpose limitations are crucial. Data collected for tax administration should not be repurposed absent specific authorization. This is a core check on executive power, reinforcing that agencies cannot expand their remit without legislative clarity. Next, we will visualize the operational handshake that was proposed between agencies. This sequence diagram traces the life cycle of a data request. The immigration agency would initiate a request. The tax authority verifies the legal basis, and counsel checks statutory authorization. A privacy officer evaluates whether the request is minimized and aligned with original purpose. There is a potential court oversight path, where an injunction can halt the process. If everything is satisfied, a limited dataset could flow through a secure interface. If not, the request is denied and the decision is logged. This shows the multiple gates intended to prevent overbroad sharing. Now let's compare competing narratives around the ruling. On one side, privacy advocates emphasize protection for vulnerable populations and the importance of trust in the tax system. They warn against mission creep, insisting that repurposing data should require explicit statutory grounding. On the other side, enforcement proponents argue that silos block legitimate investigations and that modern security requires integrated data. They view judicial blocks as privileging privacy over effective application of law. This comparison frames the core policy conflict. Next, we will tabulate the legal guardrails that structure this debate. This table outlines 5 legal guardrails: purpose limitation, statutory clarity, data minimization, oversight and audit, and transparency. Purpose limitation ensures data is used only for its original function. Statutory clarity demands specific legislative authorization for sharing. Data minimization restricts any sharing to the smallest necessary amount. Oversight and audits provide independent checks and logs. Transparency supports public accountability through reporting. With these guardrails in mind, let's consider real-world impacts. The ruling's impact is broad. Undocumented individuals who file taxes may fear that compliance could expose them to unrelated enforcement, leading to non-filing or cash economy shifts. Small businesses might worry that normal tax interactions could become gateways to immigration checks. Agencies face operational friction and litigation risk when mandates are unclear. Overall, public trust in institutions is at stake. Trust is essential for voluntary compliance. Now, let's test your understanding with a quick quiz. Question: What is the primary legal reason courts block broad interagency sharing of tax data for immigration enforcement? Options. A. Data sharing is always illegal. B. Lack of clear, explicit statutory authorization for repurposing confidential data. C. All government data is public by default. D. Courts prefer privacy to security in all cases. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section. The correct answer is the lack of clear, explicit statutory authorization. Courts require specific legislative mandates to repurpose confidential tax data for unrelated enforcement. Without that, agencies risk exceeding their authority. Next, let's map the stakeholders to see who influences policy outcomes. This mind map places the court, legislature, tax authority, immigration agency, civil society, businesses, and the public as key nodes. Courts provide judicial review and injunctions. The legislature sets statutory clarity and conducts oversight. The tax authority manages confidentiality and compliance. The immigration agency pursues enforcement goals and initiates data requests. Civil society includes privacy advocates and immigrant communities. Businesses weigh compliance costs and trust. The public ultimately determines participation and confidence in institutions. With the players in view, let's move to a citizen checklist you can act on. Here is a practical checklist. First, press lawmakers for purpose limits and explicit rules before any data sharing occurs. Second, advocate for independent audits and public reporting to sustain accountability. Third, demand data minimization and anonymization practices so that only necessary, limited data is used. Fourth, monitor agency rulemaking and use public comment opportunities. Fifth, understand your rights. Access to your data should be justified, documented, and consistent with law. Let's reinforce your understanding with one more quiz. Question: what is the most likely consequence if people believe tax data will be used for unrelated enforcement? Options. A. Higher voluntary tax compliance. B. A chilling effect that reduces filing and participation. C. No impact at all. D. Immediate increase in national security. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section. The correct answer is the chilling effect that reduces filing and participation. The perception that tax data might be used for unrelated enforcement can discourage people from engaging with formal systems, undermining public revenue and trust. Now let's visualize how this issue could evolve over time. This timeline projects possible steps: the 2024 court block, legislative hearings in 2025, and a draft bill that codifies purpose limits, minimization, and oversight. Following public comments and amendments, a law could be enacted with safeguards in 2026 or face renewed litigation. By 2027, audits and transparency reports could inform whether the system works as intended. With the road ahead in view, let's consolidate the key points. The key points are as follows. First, maintain strict legal walls between data collected for different functions. Second, require explicit statutory authority before repurposing confidential data. Third, insist on oversight, minimization, and transparency to preserve trust. Fourth, understand that the drive toward interagency integration will persist, so vigilance matters. In summary, courts provide critical checks on agency overreach, particularly regarding repurposing confidential data. Taxpayer confidentiality is vital to voluntary compliance and public trust. Effective policy balances enforcement with purpose limits, minimization, oversight, and transparency. Finally, citizen engagement through advocacy and public comments helps shape the legal guardrails that protect privacy while enabling legitimate governance. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, please like, share, and subscribe. We would love to hear your perspective on whether the court got it right, so share your thoughts in the comments below.